have access to a snippet of the COMPAS data, and we're going to use this data to illustrate interaction. So in COMPAS, a risk scoring algorithm was used to assess a criminal defendant's likelihood of reoffending. One calculation performed in this algorithm is the violent recidivism scale. This calculation gives a score out of 10 that aims to predict the criminal defendant's likelihood of committing a violent crime after their release. A higher score indicates that the individual is more likely to commit a violent crime after their release, and hence this person is thought of to be a greater risk to society than an individual with a lower score. There are lots of different variables in this data set, but a few that I'll just point out for this illustration is the priors count, which is the number of prior offences that the individual has committed. The charge description, so this is the type of crime committed and the description of the crime. And this description is of the crime that they faced at this particular point in time, when it was decided if they would get when it was decided what their score will be. Is recid is whether the individual did end up reoffending or not, and is violent recid is whether the individual ended up violently reoffending or not. So of the individuals who were charged in the data set, 68.6% of them had a prior offence, which already suggests that people who have a prior offence are more likely to reoffend again. If we delve into this data, we can see that those who had a prior offence were more likely to reoffend than those who didn't have a prior offence, 9.2% versus 5.1%. We can group the criminal charge, so our charge description, we can group this into whether it is a violent crime or a non-violent crime, depending on the description. So of the charges that the individual faced, 45.7% were charged with a violent offence, just under half. The proportion of defendants charged with a violent crime is similar to those who were charged with a non-violent crime, 8.8% versus 7.2%. But what about the defendants who were both charged with a violent offence and had a series of prior offences? An individual may face a violent charge as a one-off, and hence they are not a risk to society. Similarly, an individual with many misdemeanor charges is not necessarily a risk to society as well. They may simply be part of a community that's at odds with the police. But arguably, individuals who are likely to reoffend with a violent crime are a higher risk to society than individuals with multiple misdemeanors, such as possession of drug charges. So we can consider how the proportion of individuals that violently reoffended is affected by the interaction of prior offence and the charged type of offence that was committed, whether it was violent or not. We can immediately see that most individuals fall into a category of reoffending, but not violently. We can look at the data by the proportion of individuals who reoffended violently. If we want to prevent violent crime, and because that's the greater risk to society, looking at this data, that difference from 5.2 to 7.9, that's not very big. The chance of a violent crime if you've had a non-violent offence is not so different from the population as a whole, but the chance of reoffending violently if you've had a violent offence is greater than the population as a whole. So finally, we're going to look at this graphic here. And this graphic, we have our two columns and our two rows. And our columns show whether it was a violent offence or not, and our rows show if it was if the individual committed a prior offence or not. We have then got proportions in each of these four plots as to whether the individual ended up reoffending violently. And we could see for individuals with no prior offence, pretty much the same proportion of individuals ended up reoffending violently for those who were charged with a violent offence as those who were charged with a non-violent offence. However, the same cannot be said when we look at prior offences. Here we can see that a higher proportion of individuals reoffended violently if they had received that violent charge than those who had not received a violent charge. And this suggests an interaction.